Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Paula Salazar. Paula Salazar was born on September 6, 2015 in Venezuela to Andrina Bermudos Milian from Matarina, Monagas, and Leonardo Salazar from Tucupito, Delta Amacuro. In 2016, Paula's parents decided to move to Ecuador with their one-year-old daughter, seeking a better life. They settled in Quito, the capital city, but their relationship began to deteriorate due to various reasons. After a month, Andrina broke up with Leonardo and moved to Cuenca, Ecuador's third-largest city, with Paula. They stayed with her best friend's mother while looking for a new place to live and work. Meanwhile, Leonardo returned to his hometown of Tucupito, Venezuela, following the breakup. Later, he immigrated again, this time to Trinidad and Tobago. Leonardo had been living with a disability for a long time, the result of a motorcycle accident in his youth that left his left arm completely paralyzed. This made it difficult for him to find a good job, even in Ecuador's capital city. After Andrina moved to Cuenca, she rarely contacted Leonardo, except to tell him that she had found a job on a farm in Tapacundo. A few months later, she started a new romantic relationship with Washington Andreas Aymaro, the wealthy owner of the farm where she worked. Andrina and Andreas had a child together in 2019. With their new baby, the family seemed happier and more united than ever. However, their lives took a dramatic turn on March 27, 2020. On that day, Andreas took Paula to the flower plantations by car, but during the trip, Paula suddenly became very sick, feeling dizzy and vomiting. Andreas was forced to stop at a public restroom to tend to her. Andreas and the 4-year-old girl Paula entered a room where Paula vomited again. Andreas left her alone for a few minutes to get a change of clothes from the car, as her clothes were dirty. When he returned, he found Paula lying with her head in the toilet bowl. He pulled her out, tried to give her first aid, and rushed her to the hospital. Despite his efforts, Paula showed no signs of life when doctors examined her. The doctors pronounced Paula dead and immediately noticed inconsistencies in Andreas' story. They saw that Paula had bruises on her body and face that couldn't have occurred as Andreas described. Following medical protocol, the doctors contacted the police, who arrived shortly and arrested Andreas as a suspect in Paula's murder. Andreas claimed Paula had drowned in the toilet bowl, but the autopsy revealed a darker truth. The tests showed that Paula had been dead for about 24 hours before arriving at the hospital, contradicting Andreas's version of events. Paula's foster father alleged that he provided her with first aid and CPR, and that these efforts took place just 20 minutes before he brought her to the hospital. However, the autopsy revealed that Paula had suffered multiple broken ribs, various microtraumas, a cracked spine, and sepsis, which ultimately led to her death. The autopsy findings were alarming, as Paula's small body showed evidence of numerous injuries, both recent and old. The evidence suggested that her death was not accidental. Paula's biological father, Leonardo Salazar, discovered the tragic news 33 days after her death, when his mother in Venezuela called to inform him of the loss, having learned of it herself from a friend of Andrina's. After Leonardo left Ecuador, Andrina began a new relationship and cut off all communication with him. This is why he didn't hear about his daughter Paula's tragedy for 3 days. The only way he found out about her was through pictures sent by Andrina and their mutual friends. Andrina even blocked him on social media, preventing him from contacting Paula, and cut off ties with most of Leonardo's relatives. Andrina turned their mutual friends against Leonardo by telling them that he didn't want to communicate with Paula. However, it was Andrina's family who eventually informed Leonardo of Paula's death, claiming that she died from COVID-19 complications. But Leonardo was skeptical, as there were very few coronavirus deaths in Ecuador at the time. He started researching the statistics and noticed that there were no child victims of the coronavirus in Ecuador. Leonardo's relatives helped him investigate, and they soon found a newspaper article about Andrina's arrest on suspicion of killing Paula. When Leonardo confronted Andreina about this, she coldly told him that Paula died from diseases and couldn't provide more information due to her lawyer's advice. Leonardo then created a Facebook page and an Instagram profile dedicated to Paula, seeking justice for her death. The posts caused a huge backlash on social media, and people in Andreina's circle began contacting Leonardo, sharing information about Paula's sad life. They sent him recordings, photos, and audio recordings that revealed the abuse Paula suffered at the hands of her stepfather and Andreina. According to witnesses, Paula was constantly depressed, shy, and frightened in the presence of her stepfather. She even confessed to being beaten by Andreina and her stepfather as punishment. Paula called her stepfather a monster and was terrified of him. She suffered from insomnia and nightmares, and her mother forced her to cook and take care of herself from a very young age. Andreina's mistreatment of Paula eventually led to her death, and Leonardo was determined to bring her to justice. At the preschool Paula attended, she constantly complained of leg and back pain, and often said she couldn't walk. The teachers also noticed bruises on her body. They took her to the health center for an examination, and the doctors concluded that Paula was being mistreated by her family. The teachers then reported the abuse to a special police organization, which launched an investigation. As a result, Paula was temporarily placed in the care of her uncle, Andreina's brother, on October 16, 2019, while the investigation continued. A hearing was scheduled for December 4, 2019, but the teachers who were supposed to testify failed to show up. The hearing was rescheduled for February 27, 2020, but again, the teachers didn't appear. Without their testimony, the court had to drop the charges against Paula's parents, and she was returned to her mother on March 27th. Tragically, Paula died soon after. It is suspected that Andreina may have bribed the teachers or convinced them that Paula's parents were not responsible for her abuse. After Paula's death, Andreina was placed in protective custody, but she appealed this decision. At a hearing on June 12, 2020, the judge set a restraining order and released Andreina to house arrest. Meanwhile, Paula's father, Leonardo, was campaigning on social media and raising funds to travel from Trinidad and Tobago to Ecuador to file a complaint against Andreina. With the help of two Ecuadorian lawyers, Oswaldo and Alejandro, Leonardo was able to travel to Ecuador and file a complaint against Andreina. Leonardo's journey was extremely difficult due to closed borders and restricted travel. He had to take a raft, cross treacherous terrain, and use private transfers to reach Ecuador. On June 30th, he arrived in Quito and met with a lawyer to file his complaint. On July 6, 2020, Andreina was charged with Paula's murder, and the court ruled that she could remain under house arrest, reporting to justice twice a week. Both Andreina and her partner, Andreas, were charged with murder, which carries a maximum sentence of 13 years in prison. In November 2020, a hearing was held to set a trial date. During the hearing, Leonardo's lawyer expressed concern that Andreina might escape, given her previous suicide attempt. They requested that Andreina be fitted with an electronic monitoring bracelet, which the judge granted. A hearing was held on November 16th to reassess previous decisions. Although this process slowed down the trial, the judge managed to set a date for December. Despite limited media coverage, information about the trial of Andreas and Andreina spread through social media. The trial began on January 14, 2021, but a decision on Andreina's alternative imprisonment options had not been made, and Andreas was still being held at the Regional Detention Center. The trial was held in private, without media representatives present. Some participants joined via video link. The doctor who performed the autopsy on Paula revealed disturbing details. Paula had undergone extensive spinal reconstruction, had broken ribs that had healed on their own, and had signs of previous injuries. The autopsy also showed that Paula had nail stigmata, a condition where nails grow into the skin, as well as facial and bodily bruises and scratches, fluid buildup in her lungs, head scars, and intestinal lacerations. The assessment found that Paula's later injuries led to an infection, which gradually worsened into sepsis and ultimately caused her death. The autopsy report revealed that Paula had been dead for around 24 hours by the time Andreas took her to the hospital. The extent of her internal and external injuries shockingly demonstrated the extreme cruelty she suffered and the gross neglect by her guardians, who had never sought medical attention for her. Additionally, Paula was severely malnourished, underweight, and small for her age, with deficiencies in essential minerals and nutrients. In an attempt to downplay her role in Paula's abuse, her mother, Andrena, claimed that Paula had psychological problems, implying that the child's injuries were self-inflicted as a way to seek attention. The girl's mother testified that after her brother's birth, Paula felt neglected, stopped sleeping at night, and tried to control everyone by crying. Contrary to the decision of the authorities, Paula continued to live with her parents in October 2019, only spending a few nights at her uncle's house. This failed arrangement was linked to the abuse Paula suffered, which began in 2017, shortly after Leonardo left Ecuador. The mistreatment likely started when Andrena began a relationship with Andreas. More than 40 witnesses testified in court, confirming that Paula was a victim of abuse for at least 3 years of her short life. At the final court hearing, Andrena took full responsibility for abusing Paula, claiming she alone was responsible for the child's injuries. She admitted to physically punishing Paula with a belt and her fists. By doing so, Andrena attempted to exonerate her partner, stating he was innocent and had no involvement in the abuse. Andrena also revealed that she punished Paula because the child's presence was causing problems in her new relationship. She feared that if she broke up with her new husband, she would lose financial stability and be forced back onto the streets. As a result, caring for Paula was her lowest priority. After learning about Paula's background, the judges were concerned about the well-being of the couple's newborn son, but it's clear that he was not abused like Paula was. Andreas has consistently exercised his right to remain silent, making no statements about the incident since his arrest. By February 3, 2021, Paula's trial had concluded and the couple was sentenced. Both were found guilty of murdering the girl with a maximum sentence of 13 years. The original attorneys and the prosecution demanded the maximum punishment, but the chief judge considered an aggravating factor. Paula's age, just 4 years old, made her vulnerable and unable to defend herself. As a result, the judge sentenced Andrena and Andreas to 17 years and 4 months in prison. Under Ecuadorian law, the convicted couple had 3 days to appeal the verdict, which they were expected to do immediately. Although Andrena received a 17-year sentence, she remained on house arrest and didn't go to jail, as she exercised her right to appeal. Now a higher court must confirm her sentence for incarceration. She is still cooperating with the authorities, following the original guidelines. However, Andreas was arrested when he arrived at the hospital with a deceased girl. The fact that Andrena remains at large is causing widespread outrage and anger, particularly for Leonardo, who is concerned that she might use this opportunity. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ilana Frick. Ilana Christine Frick was born in September 1977 in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, to Croatian immigrants, George and Anafi. She was the younger of 2 daughters, and her birth was seen as a miracle by her parents, who had been told by doctors that they would not be able to conceive again after her older sister Caroline. Ilana was very close to her sister from an early age and was raised with strong values of hard work and education. Her parents worked tirelessly at a large car factory to provide for their daughters and instill in them a love of learning. Both sisters excelled in school, but Ilana stood out for her determination and passion for learning, spending all her free time reading and pursuing extracurricular activities like dance, gymnastics, and track and field. During her summer breaks, Ilana worked in cornfields to help her family and learned to budget wisely. She excelled in math and science, and by high school, she had set her sights on a career in medicine. She graduated as the top student and enrolled in a prestigious medical university without issue. It was during high school that Alana began dating Matthew Ryan, who was also studying medicine. Their romance lasted throughout their university days, but after graduation, Alana decided to continue her studies in Ottawa's university residency program, while Matthew settled for a job at a local hospital. Despite the distance, Alana and Matthew's relationship continued until nearly 2002, during which time they even planned to marry. However, they eventually decided to remain friends. By then, Alana was interning at one of the country's top clinics and was working towards earning a doctorate, while Matthew's career had stalled. In February 2003, Alana experienced love at first sight while working a night shift at the hospital. She walked into the staff room and noticed a new colleague, Mohammed Shamji, who instantly captured her attention. Mohammed was a year older than Alana and a resident in the neurosurgery department. Coming from an esteemed family of medical professionals, Mohammed was born and raised in Ottawa. His father, Farid Shamji, was a distinguished surgeon, and his mother, Edith, was a skilled psychiatrist. His older brother, Ali, was a seasoned medical biophysicist, and both brothers had graduated from Yale University. Mohammed later returned to Canada to earn his doctorate from the University of Western Ontario. Although Mohammed initially showed no interest in approaching Alana, she was drawn to him and attempted to catch his eye. Eventually, Mohammed asked his colleagues for her phone number, sent her a message, and their romance began to flourish. Alana thought Mohammed was shy and introverted because he rarely initiated conversations, felt uneasy on dates, and would suddenly change topics or become silent. However, it was later revealed that his distant behavior wasn't due to shyness, but rather a lack of interest, as he was already secretly dating another woman. When Alana found out about the other woman, she became determined to win Mohammed over and become his sole partner. Their relationship was tumultuous during the first year, with 3 breakups and reconnections, mainly due to Alana's persistence. Despite her parents' advice to leave Mohammed, Alana remained committed, believing she had found her true love. Alana showered Mohammed with gifts, surprises, and home-cooked meals, but he only occasionally reciprocated her efforts. Meanwhile, Mohammed seemed to simply accept her affections, reciprocating only infrequently, creating an unbalanced dynamic in their relationship. In the summer of 2004, Alana discovered she was unexpectedly pregnant, which caused anxiety for both her and her partner. Despite their surprise, Mohammed, who was raised in a traditional Muslim country, felt pressured to marry Alana before their child was born, following cultural customs. The couple had 2 wedding ceremonies in early September 2004, one that respected Mohammed's family's cultural traditions and another with friends at a trendy restaurant complex. Although they appeared happy and in love, their marriage marked the beginning of a difficult period that would ultimately end in tragedy. In January 2005, they moved into a spacious house in an upscale Ottawa neighborhood and welcomed their daughter, Yasmin Ina. However, the birth of their daughter did not improve their marriage. Mohammed prioritized his career and education, neglecting his wife and newborn daughter. Moreover, he openly expressed his disappointment at not having a son. After having her baby, Alana took maternity leave to care for her child and manage the household. However, this led to tension with her husband, who would come home from work and isolate himself in his office, hardly spending time with Alana and their daughter. As time passed, he grew increasingly anxious, irritable, and critical, often belittling Alana's appearance, refusing her cooking, and even calling her stupid and useless. Despite her struggles, Alana kept her family problems private, not even sharing them with close friends or her parents. However, one day, while talking to her mother on the phone, her husband came home in a bad mood and began insulting Alana, which her mother overheard. Her mother tried to defend her, but her son-in-law shifted the blame to Alana, claiming she was responsible for their failing marriage. Alana's mother advised her to file for divorce and leave the abusive relationship, but Alana refused, insisting that she loved her husband and could handle the situation herself. Alana remained silent about Muhammad's physical abuse because the verbal abuse had become routine for him. However, the situation escalated in the summer of 2005 when Muhammad, in a fit of rage, punched Alana in the face, breaking her nose. Alana, holding her baby, fled to friends and reported the domestic violence to the police. She also decided to divorce Muhammad and leave him for good. Surprisingly, Muhammad began pleading with Alana to return, promising to never hit her again, raise his voice, or engage in any form of abuse. He claimed he would change and make their family life perfect, controlling his emotions. While Muhammad appeared genuinely remorseful, his actions were motivated by self-interest. As a young neurosurgeon, he was about to enroll at Duke University to pursue his doctorate, and a criminal conviction would jeopardize his promising medical career. Muhammad's primary concern was his own future, but he managed to convince Alana to drop the charges and file for divorce. She even agreed to follow him to North Carolina, where he would continue his studies and earn a degree. After a period of turmoil, Muhammad and Alana's family life became more stable. Muhammad was accepted into a competitive biomed engineering program, a significant achievement. Alana, meanwhile, enrolled in a master's program at Duke University, where she received a scholarship to cover her tuition. As a result, the couple had more time for each other, and their relationship became more solid. They decided to have another child, and in August 2007, their daughter Fisa was born. Although Muhammad had hoped for a son, the family was generally happy. In the summer of 2009, the family returned to Canada, settling back into their Ottawa home. Alana quickly returned to work as a family doctor at a prestigious hospital, earning a good reputation. Muhammad juggled his work, studies, and university teaching responsibilities. Around the same time, social media was becoming popular, and the couple started a personal blog that presented an idealized image of their family life. Behind their perfect facade, Muhammad and Alana's relationship was troubled. He controlled every aspect of her life, dictating who she could see, what she wore, and even monitoring her online activities. He would openly criticize her appearance, style, and parenting, but Alana chose to remain silent and tolerant of his behavior. As time passed, Muhammad's aggression and yelling increased, always blaming Alana for their arguments and problems. In 2011, he was offered a prestigious fellowship in spinal surgery in Calgary, which he accepted. However, he moved without his family, leaving them behind in Ottawa, and they were forced to maintain a long-distance relationship for over a year. During a visit home, Muhammad left his laptop on, and Alana discovered a message on his social media from a woman, implying a romantic involvement. When Alana confronted him directly, he admitted to having an affair and didn't deny it. This revelation was a devastating blow to Alana, and she considered divorcing her husband again. Her family thought she wouldn't forgive him this time, but surprisingly, Alana gave her family another chance. Muhammad promised to end the affair and start fresh in Toronto, where he had received a prestigious job offer. Muhammad and Alana had a third child, Marius, in 2013, hoping to strengthen their family. However, Muhammad's behavior towards Alana didn't change, and he continued to focus on his medical career, becoming a respected neurosurgeon. Alana also advanced in her career, but tension between them grew. During a family ski vacation, Muhammad's abuse resumed, leaving Alana with a deep cut on her arm that required stitches. Initially, she claimed it was a skiing accident, but later confided in her friend that it was from an argument over another affair. Alana overheard a private phone call between her husband, Muhammad, and his mistress. When she confronted him about it, he physically abused her. A friend advised Alana to divorce Muhammad, but she refused. Her friend jokingly suggested that Alana have an affair to get revenge, and although they laughed, Alana might have considered it a viable option to get back at her cheating husband. The summer of 2016 was difficult. While their older kids were at camp, Alana's youngest child stayed with her parents. During this time, the couple's relationship deteriorated. In early September, they celebrated their 12th anniversary on social media, but just a week later, they discussed getting a divorce. Mohammed refused, stating he was content, while Alana felt desperate. She started an affair with a colleague who had shown interest in her. Alana found solace in this new relationship, enjoying the care, attention, and feeling loved again. She became so enthralled that she might have considered leaving her children behind to be with her lover. On November 25, 2016, a fierce argument erupted in the family when Alana told her husband Mohammed that divorce was inevitable. The next day, she consulted a divorce lawyer and then departed for a 3-day medical conference in another city. During her time away, Mohammed frantically sent her messages begging her to reconsider and salvage their marriage for the sake of their children. When Alana returned home on November 30th, she made a final phone call to her parents, attempting to reassure them that everything was okay despite her anxious tone. What her parents didn't know was that Alana had tried to contact the police that evening, but unfortunately, she misdialed the number, which would have devastating consequences. The following day, December 1st, Alana's mother Anna tried to reach her daughter but couldn't get through, so she called her son-in-law Mohammed to find out what was going on. In a calm tone, Mohammed deceived Anna, telling her that Alana had abandoned him and their children in the middle of the night to be with another man. Alana's parents were suspicious of Mohammed's story, knowing their daughter would never abandon her children. They contacted a close friend of Alana's who lived nearby, asking her to keep an eye on the Mohammed home while they rushed to Toronto to file a missing persons report with the police. Alana's family was worried when her friend said her car was still in the driveway. When her parents arrived at her house, everything seemed normal, but Mohammed was upset, insisting that Alana was with her boyfriend and that the police had been called unnecessarily. He had already told the police this when they visited earlier. Later, on December 2nd, a man walking his dog near the river, about 24 miles from the Mohammed's home, found a new-looking large suitcase under a bridge. Despite initial hesitation, his curiosity led him to open it, and he was shocked to find the body of a blonde woman inside. He immediately contacted the police, who sent the suitcase and body to the medical examiner to identify the victim and determine the cause of death. Alana's body was easily identified due to a luggage tag on her suitcase from a recent conference trip. Her parents confirmed her identity. An autopsy revealed that she had suffered multiple abrasions and bruises, but the primary cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation and a broken neck. The body was found dressed in pajamas, with no shoes, and positioned in a way that suggested she was placed in the suitcase shortly after death. Mohammed, the suspect, was apprehended the same evening at a coffee shop where he was consulting with a lawyer, apparently preparing to flee the country. However, he was caught before he could escape. He was charged with first-degree murder, but the neurosurgeon denied any involvement in the crime. A disturbing aspect of the incident came to light. Their 12-year-old daughter, Yasmin, had unknowingly witnessed her mother's murder. According to Yasmin, she heard screams and noise coming from her parents' room and rushed in. She cracked open the door to see her father kneeling behind the bed, with her mother likely lying on the floor, out of her sight. Mohammed yelled at Yasmin, telling her to leave, shut the door, and go back to bed. The next morning, he told the girls that their mother had left. Despite her young age, Yasmin sensed that something terrible had happened, but she struggled to believe that her father could have killed her mother. To protect Yasmin from having to testify in court, Mohammed confessed to the crime and recounted the events of that fateful evening. Mohammed and his wife, Alana, got into an argument about her infidelity and desire for a divorce. The situation escalated quickly, and Mohammed physically attacked Alana, knocking a phone out of her hand as she tried to call the police. He struck her multiple times in the face, pinned her to the floor, and strangled her. Their daughter walked into the room but couldn't see what was happening because of the bed. When Muhammad realized Alana was no longer breathing, he tried to resuscitate her, but it was too late. He had broken her neck during the attack. He then put her body in a large suitcase, drove around for hours, and eventually threw the suitcase off a bridge into a river, hoping the current would carry it away. However, the suitcase got stuck against the bridge's foundation in the darkness. During Muhammad's trial in 2017, his father, Farid Shamji, caused an uproar by making disparaging comments about his deceased daughter-in-law. Shamji tried to justify his son's actions, claiming Alana had been unfaithful and provoked Muhammad. These comments led to an investigation, and Shamji's medical license was revoked in April 2019. Muhammad was convicted of second-degree murder and received a life sentence, but he will be eligible for parole in 14 years. Since he had already served time during the trial, he could be released as early as 2030. As part of his sentence, Muhammad is not allowed to contact his children or Alana's parents and must pay them a substantial amount of money in compensation. He has also been banned from practicing medicine or teaching again, having his medical license revoked permanently. Alana's parents are now taking care of the children who have been left. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lindsay Cutshall. Lindsay was born in 1982 in Ohio and grew up in a very religious family. She was an active and adventurous person, interested in sports, hiking, and extreme tourism. She attended Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia and dreamed of founding her own summer camp for children and teenagers. Jason, on the other hand, was born in 1978 in Michigan and also grew up in a deeply religious family. He was interested in hiking tours, mastering survival in the wild, and had leadership qualities. The couple met in 2002 during a hiking trip in Appalachia and immediately felt a mutual connection. They got engaged 6 months later and planned to get married in September 2004, with big plans for their future together. Lindsay and Jason, senior counselors at a Christian summer camp in California, had plans to start their own relationship. In the summer of 2004, they decided to take a weekend trip to the San Francisco area. They informed their colleagues in advance, leaving 2 experienced counselors in charge, and promised to return by Monday. They set off in Lindsay's 1992 red Ford Tempo, but that was the last time anyone saw them alive. By Sunday evening, they hadn't returned, but no alarm was raised, as everyone was confident they would arrive late that night or early Monday morning. However, when they still hadn't returned after the morning roll call at 8 a.m., their colleagues contacted the police and informed the missing couple's families. The police investigation faced a significant problem. No one knew precisely where they had gone. They had planned to explore around San Francisco, and their love for adventure and extreme leisure made it possible they could be in remote areas with no communication or civilization. While the police waited for the legally mandated 2 days, during which the missing were expected to report themselves, relatives and friends organized a search effort. They distributed flyers with photos of the couple and requested anyone who might have seen them to respond immediately. By Tuesday, law enforcement had joined the search operation, focusing on San Francisco, its suburbs, and surroundings. However, the area was vast, making it impossible to thoroughly search it. A friend's suggestion that the couple loved wild, rocky beaches prompted the police to focus on these areas. The search yielded no results for several days, and hope of finding the couple alive was rapidly diminishing. Then, on Wednesday, August 19th, a patrol helicopter flying over one of the rocky wild beaches reported finding 2 bodies in sleeping bags. The police arrived at the scene to find the red Ford Tempo parked on a cliff near a lookout point and a steep trail leading directly to the beach. The car was identified as belonging to Lindsay Cutshall. Descending the trail to the beach, officers found 2 individuals in bright sleeping bags. Initially, it seemed like they were just sleeping, but they didn't respond to calls or noise. Upon closer inspection, officers discovered that the sleeping bags contained a young man and woman, both showing no signs of life. A brief examination suggested that they had died from gunshot wounds to the head, and the distinctive smell of decomposition indicated they had been there for more than a day. All of the victims' belongings, including mobile phones, wallets containing bank cards and cash, were found beside them, ruling out robbery as a motive. The keys to their parked car above were also visibly placed, eliminating car theft as a motive. Investigators immediately suspected that the deceased were the same young couple who had gone missing last week near San Francisco. This was later confirmed by documents found nearby, identifying them as Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen. The investigation revealed that the couple's bodies had no signs of physical or intimate assault, except for the gunshot wounds to the head. It appeared that Lindsay and Jason were sleeping peacefully at the time of the incident and didn't have a chance to react or defend themselves. The lack of signs of struggle or escape attempts suggested a swift and brutal act, resembling an execution or vendetta. The questions surrounding the case multiplied, but no answers were forthcoming. There were no signs of anyone else having stayed in the area, and the secluded beach was only accessible via a steep trail. Despite efforts, no shell casings were found nearby, leading investigators to theorize that the shooter either took them or threw them into the ocean. The shots had been fired at close range into the victims' heads, indicated by specific traces. An empty beer bottle from a rare brand, not commonly found in the area, was discovered a few meters from the sleeping bags. Since the victims didn't drink alcohol, it was possible that the bottle belonged to the shooter. This was considered a significant lead, although it was unclear whether it had any connection to the shooter or the crime. One theory proposed that the couple might have had a conflict with someone the day before the tragedy, and their opponent returned at night with a weapon to settle the score. Although Jason and Lindsay were very friendly with everyone, it was possible that they might have inadvertently displeased someone. The investigation considered the possibility that the shooter was intoxicated or mentally unstable. A crucial clue was found in the rare Marlin brand rifle, .45 caliber Model 18, produced in 1994, which was identified from the bullets extracted from the victims' skulls. Based on this, investigators speculated that the shooter was likely a male acting alone, possibly a hunter or firearm enthusiast. To piece together their final hours, investigators analyzed the photos they took and the guest book entries they wrote in the tourist cabin near the lookout point. They had stopped at a fishing pier about 20 miles away, which was confirmed by witness accounts and photographs. They had searched for a place to stay overnight, but found no vacancies in nearby hotels due to the peak tourist season. They then dined at a local restaurant, took a walk, and set off again in the evening. Witnesses reported that they were friendly and showed no signs of conflict. However, they had decided to camp on the prohibited beach, using their sleeping bags instead of a tent, believing they faced no threats on a warm August night. The investigation narrowed down the time frame of the crime to between 11 p.m. on Saturday and dawn on Sunday, when the couple likely went to sleep but did not survive until morning. Initially, suspicion fell on a local drifter who was seen nearby on the evening before the crime, but he was quickly cleared due to lack of evidence and DNA mismatch. The investigation into the double homicide stalled for nearly 2 years until the spring of 2006, when the police decided to release details of the weapon used in the crime and offered a $50,000 reward for any useful information. This led to around 1,000 calls, although most did not advance the investigation. However, the police became interested in 26-year-old Sean Gallen, who was pointed out by several locals. According to them, Gallen collected firearms and bladed weapons, behaved aggressively, and was frequently involved in conflicts, threatened acts of violence, and occasionally damaged other people's property. Gallen was arrested and questioned, but he had previously been on the police's radar for brawling, hooliganism, and driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. He indeed had an impressive collection of weapons, but the specific rifle in question was not among them. Verifying his alibi from 2 years prior proved impossible, and his DNA did not match the sample found on the beer bottle at the crime scene, so Gallon had to be released. Simultaneously, another suspicious and aggressive drifter, 61-year-old Joseph Henry Burgess, came under scrutiny. He was often seen with a firearm, frightening local residents. It was discovered that in the late 1970s, Burgess lived in Canada, where he joined the Commune of the Children of God, positioning himself as a deeply religious person. However, he soon had a conflict with 2 young people that escalated into outright enmity, and a few weeks later, these individuals were found lifeless, each with several close-range gunshot wounds to the head. Notably, their bodies were also discovered on a beach in sleeping bags, seemingly taken while they slept. By the time the police arrived, Burgess had vanished, and his guilt was proven through numerous left-behind clues. However, he could not be convicted as he had fled to the USA, crossing the border illegally, and managed to evade capture for nearly a quarter of a century. Fast forward to 2017 in Forestville, California, a tragedy unfolded one night on March 14th. Gunshots rang out in the Gallon family home, prompting alarmed neighbors to immediately call the police. The victim was 35-year-old Seamus Gallon, and the perpetrator was his older brother, Sean. An argument had erupted between the siblings, during which Sean, under the influence of prohibited substances, grabbed a firearm and discharged 3 bullets into his younger brother. The police recognized the shooter's name, as Sean had previously been detained as a suspect in a double homicide on a beach, but was released due to a lack of evidence. Since then, he had been on the police's radar twice for property damage and making threats, but had only received fines. It was also discovered that the detainee was an avid hunter and had a hobby of crafting knives and other bladed weapons. Those around him described him as antisocial, aggressive, and unpredictable. After taking his brother's life, Sean attempted to flee but was almost immediately apprehended. Law enforcement reopened the case and took a closer look at a man who was a potential suspect 13 years earlier. On his social media, he had posted pictures of his large collection of weapons and claimed to have telepathic and extrasensory abilities. He believed he was on a special mission, receiving assignments from space, which suggested that he had a disturbed mind. The police suspected that he had serious mental health issues. He refused to cooperate with the investigation, spoke nonsensically, and maintained his innocence. However, when detectives checked the personal messages on his deceased brother's social media page, they found something interesting. Back in 2006, when a $50,000 reward was offered for information on the double homicide case, Sean's former girlfriend had sent a message to his brother, suggesting that she could claim the reward by turning in her ex-boyfriend. They both knew the truth, but kept silent. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible to question either of them, since the brother had been shot and the woman had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. When shown the printouts of the messages between his former girlfriend and his brother, Sean surprisingly confessed and began to give a detailed account of the crime. Despite it being over 13 years since the double homicide, Sean remembered the details of that night vividly. He claimed that he had left his house with a Marlin rifle, intending to hunt in a wooded area. He wandered aimlessly for a couple of hours before descending to a wild beach, which he claimed was a spot to encounter bears. As he walked along the shore, he spotted 2 bright sleeping bags and discovered a young man and woman sound asleep inside. He stood watching them for several minutes before suddenly hearing voices in his head commanding him to end their lives. Sean claimed this was the mission from space he could not ignore. He placed the barrel of his rifle almost against the young man's head and pulled the trigger. The sound woke the young woman, but before she could comprehend the situation, a second shot ended her life as well. Sean Gallen committed a brutal double homicide on a beach. After shooting the couple, he collected the shell casings and took them away in an empty beer can. He then gave the rifle to his father, asking him to hide it. The father buried the rifle in the cellar of his old barn without asking any questions. Years later, when Sean was arrested, he blamed the voices in his head for ordering him to commit violent acts. His defense team claimed he was mentally ill and unfit to stand trial. However, a forensic psychiatric evaluation revealed that although Sean suffered from mental disorders exacerbated by substance abuse, he had deliberately planned and executed the crime. The evaluation showed that Sean was fully aware of his actions and had taken steps to cover his tracks and avoid police detection. This included killing the young man first, knowing the woman would be unable to resist, and taking the casings with him to hide evidence. What was surprising was that Sean's family members and former girlfriend had suspected or known about his involvement in the crime, but none of them had reported him to the police. Sean was eventually tried and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole, plus an additional 94 years for killing his own brother in 2017. He is currently serving his sentence in a special prison unit for dangerous inmates with mental disorders, where he is kept under close surveillance due to his aggressive behavior and claims of hearing voices. The motive behind the double homicide was never established, with Sean simply deciding to end the couple's lives because he saw that to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Maricela Botella Valadez. Maricela Botella Valadez was born in 1997 in Seattle, Washington. She was the eldest of 2 children in a family of Latin American descent. People described her as a sweet, sociable young woman who always had many friends, performed well in school, and after graduating, became a student at a prestigious university. Furthermore, Maricela was considered truly beautiful, petite, slim, with big brown eyes, luxurious hair, and a flawless figure. On Saturday, October 3, 2020, she flew to Dallas to meet up with old friends. However, by Monday morning, she planned to return. Her brother was supposed to meet her at the airport on October 5th, after which they would head to the university together. But the plane arrived without her. The search for her began when her brother realized she was not among the passengers from the flight. Concerned, he tried to call her, but her phone was turned off. He then called their parents to inform them about the situation. Since Maricela was a serious and responsible young woman, her disappearance without warning and not showing up for university classes was out of character. The family started calling her friends in Dallas, trying to find out where she might have gone and where she was last seen. It turned out that the night before, she had been partying at one of the city's most popular clubs, where she met a black man named Chuck. The pair danced, enjoyed themselves, and had alcoholic drinks, after which they disappeared together. Maricela was not seen again, and her phone went unanswered. The information seriously alarmed and frightened her parents, so they immediately decided to report her disappearance to the police. It turned out that the young woman had indeed bought tickets for a flight to Seattle, but for some reason she had not boarded the plane. No one had seen her since that night, and no one knew where she might be. The officers reviewed external surveillance camera footage, which showed she leaving with a young man whose face was unclear. The footage suggested she was walking with him voluntarily. They got into a black Audi and drove away in an unknown direction. Days passed without contact or signs of life from her. She hadn't logged into her social media accounts, and there were no transactions on her bank cards. The police needed to identify the mysterious man she was with to determine where to look for her. One of her friends mentioned that her companion might be named Chuck, but that information was insufficient. Fortunately, street camera footage helped investigators determine the direction the car traveled. The pair was also caught on camera at a supermarket where they appeared happy and affectionate. The young woman picked out drinks and candies, and the young man paid using a card in the name of Charles Beltran. it was discovered that Beltran, a 31-year-old musician, had a criminal past, including 2 incarcerations for robbery and armed assault. He had recently been released on parole and was preparing to release his own music album. Investigators tracked down his address and found that her phone had been active at that location on the night she disappeared. When police visited the address with an FBI agent, they found the house empty, but managed to contact the owner, Lisa Dyke, by phone. She claimed Charles Beltran had been renting a room from her, but moved out 2 weeks prior, and she had no knowledge of his whereabouts. With the sole suspect unlocated, law enforcement obtained a warrant to search the house. What they found was alarming and frightening. The house was in disarray, with dirty dishes, moldy food, and trash scattered everywhere. It seemed as though the occupants had left in a hurry, taking only essentials. Notably, numerous empty bottles of cleaning and detergent products were found, with traces on the floors and carpets, indicating a thorough cleaning had taken place. In one of the upstairs rooms, a black statue of death, resembling the Mexican cult of Santa Muerte, was set up as an altar with wax candles, dried flowers, and 2 metal bowls. A thorough examination of the house revealed wiped blood stains in one of the bedrooms, the bathroom, and the hallway. The bedroom with the blood-soaked carpet belonged to Charles Beltran. It was clear that a violent crime had taken place, but the identity of the victim was unknown. The occupants had hastily cleaned up and fled, but traces of blood remained, having seeped into the carpet, under the baseboards, and onto the wallpaper and furniture. DNA experts compared the found bloodstains to Maricella's DNA, dispelling any doubts that the blood belonged to her. The house was sealed as a crime scene, and the task was to find the main suspect. However, Charles had fled, and the owner had already put the house up for sale. To learn more, the police decided to investigate the backgrounds of everyone who had recently lived in the house. Neighbors revealed that 3 people lived in the house: 57-year-old Lisa Dyke, 48-year-old Nina Morano, and 31-year-old Charles Beltran. However, the nature of their relationships and their sudden disappearance remained unclear. It was necessary to investigate each individual's background and find and interrogate them as soon as possible. The house owner, Lisa Dyke, was a commanding, ambitious, and contentious woman who had been married 3 times and received a substantial inheritance after becoming a widow. She had no financial necessity to rent a room to Charles, suggesting she had some other interest in him. Charles, or Chuck, Beltran dreamed of making it big in the music scene, but he lacked money and connections, and his criminal past hindered him. Lisa Dyke helped him by moving him into her house, setting up a small recording studio, and even sponsoring the filming of several music videos for him. She also bought him a car, paid for his entertainment, and fashionable clothes, claiming their relationship was strictly business and that she saw great potential in the talented young man. About Nina Morano, she and Lisa had been in an intimate relationship for a long time and had officially legalized their union by getting married several months ago. A close friend revealed that Lisa had an intimate relationship with Charles, which drove her insane with jealousy. Charles also had a vested interest in living with a wealthy older lover who solved all his financial problems and helped him build a music career. Charles frequently engaged in brief, casual relationships with young women, which fueled Lisa's intense jealousy. However, what role did Nina Morano play in the disappearance of Maricela, and how did she fit into Charles's love triangle? According to a close friend, Lisa's spouse, Charles, was part of this unusual love triangle with Nina, and he insisted that his young lover sleep with both women. After their wedding, both women took Charles's last name, and the household consisted of Charles, Lisa, and Nina Beltran. The investigation into Maricela's disappearance revealed that no one had been seen at the house where her blood was found, and Lisa was only contacted once. She claimed to be in another state and then ceased responding to calls. The whereabouts of Nina and Charles, the main suspect, were also unknown. Mobile phone signals indicated that on the night of October 5th, All 4 individuals, including Maricela, were at the house. By early morning, their device signals had moved to a suburban area of Dallas, where they eventually disappeared. A few days later, Lisa responded from her second work phone, which also became unreachable. Using geolocation data from the mobile devices, the route the group took that night was traced, and the stops they made were identified. It was presumed that they might have disposed of Maricela's body in that area, defining a broad search radius. However, the search operation was slow and eventually halted due to the vast and difficult-to-navigate area. In March 2021, a local hunter stumbled upon a human skull in the woods, which was later identified as Maricela's through dental records. Although the advanced state of decomposition and animal damage made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, characteristic marks on the bones suggested knife wounds. The authorities soon tracked down Lisa, who had moved to Florida with Nina and rented a house in Miami. However, only Nina was apprehended, while Charles went into hiding. Although he occasionally communicated with former girlfriends, he left no traces of his whereabouts. Nina, now incarcerated, refused to provide any information, claiming she knew nothing about Maricela's fate. Meanwhile, Lisa attempted to hire a good lawyer for her spouse using her connections. It emerged that Nina had put her house in South Carolina up for sale, indicating that she needed the money to continue hiding or leave the country. A month after her disappearance, authorities found and arrested Lisa, and both women were taken back to Dallas. During initial questioning, they refused to cooperate, and each was held on a $500,000 bond. They managed to post bail and were released under house arrest, wearing tracking bracelets to monitor their movements. However, they made a daring escape attempt in August of that year. Meanwhile, the police tracked Charles to Utah, where he was hiding at the home of one of his ex-girlfriends. She was raising a 5-year-old son fathered by Beltran and was thrilled to see him, not questioning his sudden return. Charles initially refused to testify or cooperate with the police, hoping his wealthy lover would use her money and connections to hire a good lawyer and help him avoid prison. However, the situation changed drastically on Christmas Eve 2012. The tracking bracelets worn by Lisa and Nina suddenly went offline due to holiday chaos, and it took until the next day for the police to arrive at their location. By then, the suspects were gone. It turned out they had been planning their escape for months and had already crossed the border into Mexico. From there, they flew to South Korea, where their trail was lost in Cambodia. The FBI joined the investigation, working with Cambodian police and immigration services to track down the fugitives. She came under law enforcement's radar after withdrawing a large sum of money from an ATM. They tried to pay in cash everywhere to avoid revealing their whereabouts, but ATM cameras helped identify them, and a neighboring building's camera captured the license plate number of the car they arrived in. This information led the police to the driver, who took them to the house rented by the extravagant foreigners. They were arrested and extradited to the U.S. in February 2022, where they were denied bail and sent directly to jail. Charles, realizing his lover was not going to save him from prison, began to cooperate with the investigation and provided information. His account of the events of that dreadful night horrified many. Charles confessed that he had been in an intimate relationship with the homeowner, Lisa, and her spouse, and that he engaged in these relationships for money and to advance his music career. He had no warm feelings towards her and often had affairs with young and attractive women, which he never hid. While Lisa sometimes became wildly jealous, Na was indifferent to his actions. On the fateful night of October 5, 2020, Charles met Maricela at a nightclub. After spending hours drinking and dancing, he invited her over, and she agreed. When they arrived at his place late at night, Na and Lisa were already asleep. Charles took Maricela to his room, where they engaged in intimate activities and later fell asleep. Charles claimed he was awakened by a noise and was disoriented, still intoxicated. When he turned on the light, he saw a horrific scene. Maricella's body had slid to the floor next to the bed, and she had bled out. Na entered the room, and they stood there for a few minutes, not trying to help the victim. When Charles regained his composure, he realized the crime might be pinned on him due to his criminal record, and his influential lovers could escape punishment. So, he agreed to help dispose of the body and cover up the crime. According to Lisa's lawyer, she had no motive to attack and kill Maricela. Lisa claimed her relationship with Charles was strictly business, and she viewed his promising music career as a good investment. She wasn't concerned about who he slept with or flirted with. However, Lisa did say that Charles was hot-tempered and cruel, especially when drunk. She claimed that on the night of the murder, Charles brought a new girl from the club, and an argument erupted. Charles grabbed a knife, and despite Lisa and Na's attempts to intervene, Maricela was killed. They helped dispose of the body and clean up the scene under the threat of becoming Charles's next victims. Lisa's friend testified that Lisa was obsessed with Charles and had repeatedly confessed to wanting to eliminate any girl who got close to him. The friend also mentioned an odd statue of Santa Muerte at Lisa's house, which Lisa claimed was for black magic to ensure Charles' devotion to her. However, it seemed the ritual failed, and Lisa resorted to using a knife. Another witness, a real estate agent, testified that Lisa and Na were eager to sell several properties they owned as quickly as possible, including their Dallas home, which was the site of the alleged crime. The court took into account Charles's full confession and cooperation with the investigation. Lisa Dyke Beltran was found guilty of the brutal crime against Maricela, concealing evidence, and attempting to flee. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Charles Beltran and Nina Morin fully admitted their guilt and agreed to cooperate with the investigation. They were found guilty of concealing evidence, and Nina was sentenced to 7 years in prison, with the possibility of release in 3 years due to good behavior. Charles, previously convicted on multiple occasions, was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 8 years. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Lenway. Nicole Lenway, also known as Nikki Lenford, was born on July 11, 1989, in a small town in Minnesota. There is little information available about her parents and early life. According to some reports, her father left the family when she was young, and her mother raised her alone, providing her with a good education. Nikki was an exceptional student and athlete, excelling in track and field and martial arts. She decided to dedicate her life to fighting crime and served in law enforcement. After graduating with honors from the police academy, she moved to Minneapolis and joined the Criminal Investigation Department as an assistant investigator. Colleagues described Nikki as a determined, goal-oriented woman and a fearless officer, ready to take risks. However, in her personal life, she became a pawn in the hands of a sophisticated manipulator. In 2012, at a martial arts competition, 23-year-old Nicole met Timothy "Tim" Ama, a coach and martial arts master who was 8 years her senior. Timothy, a gentleman man, won Nikki's heart with his charming nature and kind gestures. He demonstrated his reliability and care, making Nikki fall deeply in love with him. They started a romantic relationship and moved in together. Initially, everything was wonderful, and Nikki felt happy and loved. However, Timothy's behavior began to change gradually. He revealed his true nature, but subtly enough that Nikki wasn't alarmed at first. Behind his charming facade, Timothy was a sophisticated tormentor who enjoyed flirting with other women, even in Nikki's presence. This behavior hurt and humiliated Nikki, making her feel insecure. Nikki had hoped that Timothy would eventually settle down and become more restrained, but months passed, and his behavior didn't change. He continued to flirt and engage in affairs, assuring Nikki that he loved only her. When Nikki confronted him, he would snap at her, saying she had no right to tell him what to do. He would later apologize, telling Nikki that no one would ever love her as much as he did, and she would forgive him. The situation escalated in the fall of 2014 when Timothy flew into a rage during a minor argument, grabbing Nikki by the throat and choking her until she almost lost consciousness. He then pushed her into a wall, making her realize that she was in an unhealthy relationship. However, her emotional attachment to Timothy was too strong, and she forgave him once again. Timothy's behavior towards Nikki was extremely controlling and jealous. He would constantly monitor her movements, check her phone and social media without her permission, and accuse her of infidelity without any evidence. Despite his own infidelity, he would manipulate Nikki into believing that no one would ever love her as much as he did, trapping her in the relationship. In November 2015, after a violent argument, Nikki gathered her belongings and left the house. Timothy, who didn't believe she would actually leave, chased her down, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her back inside. However, Nikki's screams and struggles attracted the attention of their neighbors, forcing Timothy to back down. Finally, free from the abusive relationship, Nikki felt a sense of relief. But Timothy didn't give up. He shifted his tactics from threats and blackmail to romantic gestures, sending flowers and messages filled with tenderness, pleading for another chance. For a month, Nikki stood firm, refusing to return to him. However, her plans were disrupted when she discovered she was pregnant in December 2015. Nikki knew that if Timothy found out, he would use it to manipulate her into getting back together. She tried to keep her pregnancy a secret, but their mutual friends and acquaintances soon informed Timothy, who urged her to return to him, arguing that their child should grow up in a complete family. Nikki, who grew up without a father, understood the challenges of single parenthood, but she also recognized that being with a manipulative and cruel person like Timothy would be detrimental to her and the child. Despite still having feelings for him, she refused to reunite with her ex-boyfriend, but she did agree to let him participate in their child's life as a nominal father. Nicole gave birth to a healthy boy named Callahan Ammer on June 20, 2016. The father, Tim, acknowledged paternity and initially expressed a desire to raise the child with Nicole. However, it soon became clear that Tim was not interested in being a good father and only wanted to use the child as a tool to manipulate Nicole. Nicole took almost a year of maternity leave to care for her son, devoting herself entirely to motherhood. Meanwhile, Tim continued his carefree life with multiple lovers and casual connections. He even had a system in place where he would signal to his lovers when he was available by turning on a purple light in his bedroom. In 2016, Tim started living with his 18-year-old protege, Colin, who had been deeply in love with him since she was 14. Despite the significant age difference, the couple hid their relationship from outsiders, claiming Colin was just renting a room in Tim's house. By the summer of 2017, Nicole was forced to return to work as a forensic expert at the Maine Police Headquarters in Minneapolis. With her unpredictable work schedule, she would often ask Tim to look after their son, mainly because she believed it was beneficial for the boy to spend time with his father and to save on nanny costs. However, Tim would always shift the responsibility onto Colin, who developed a fondness for the little boy and enjoyed taking care of him. Tim would tell Colin that Nicole was a bad mother who didn't want to care for her child and was looking for excuses to offload her son onto them. In the spring of 2017, Nicole started a new romantic relationship with a fellow police officer named Donovan Ford, who treated her with tenderness and care and expressed a desire to adopt Callahan. However, when Tim found out about their relationship, he became enraged and decided to use their son and the naive Colin to destroy Nicole's new relationship. Tim would regularly report to social services that Donovan was abusing Callahan and that Nicole was doing nothing to stop it, resulting in frequent visits from Child Protective Services. For years, Nicole and her new partner were subjected to harassment and intimidation by her ex-boyfriend, Timothy, who falsely accused them of domestic violence. Timothy convinced Colin, a friend, that Nicole and her partner were a danger to their son, Callahan, and that they might harm him. Timothy continued to psychologically manipulate Colin, convincing him that Callahan was in danger and that Nicole and her partner were cruel to him. Meanwhile, Timothy harassed and threatened Nicole and her partner, even filing false police reports against them. Donovan tried to have a calm and rational conversation with Timothy, but it didn't work. Timothy continued to terrorize Nicole and her partner, making their lives a living hell. He eventually took the matter to court, claiming he wanted sole custody of their son. Nicole was terrified, knowing Timothy's ability to lie and manipulate. She understood that he didn't actually care about their son's well-being. He just wanted to punish her for moving on with her life. Meanwhile, Nicole decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his erratic behavior and the threat he posed to her and her family. She was confident that she would gain custody of their son, but she knew the legal battles could drag on for years. During this time, Timothy continued to concoct fabricated stories, including a false accusation that Nicole had tried to run him over with her car. However, he couldn't provide any evidence to support his claim. In September 2022, the custody case went to court, with Timothy accusing Nicole of harming their son. However, the court saw through his lies and awarded sole custody to Nicole. Despite this, Timothy persisted and appealed the decision. He was eventually allowed to see his son at a specialized family center designed to minimize conflict between parents. However, on April 19, 2022, when Nicole arrived at the family center to pick up her son, a mysterious attacker dressed in black clothing and a mask approached her, shot her 4 times at close range, and quickly disappeared. Incredibly, Nicole remained conscious and managed to call emergency services despite being severely injured. A woman happened to be driving by when she heard shots fired and saw a black figure jump into a vehicle and speed away. She immediately pulled over to ensure the shooter was gone, then rushed to help the victim, Nicole. The woman explained what had happened to the dispatcher, provided the address, and pressed her clothing against Nicole's wounds to stop the bleeding, ultimately saving her life. Nicole spent several days in a coma, teetering on the brink of life and death. She lost a lot of blood and her vital organs were affected, but doctors managed to stabilize her condition. Medical professionals believed Nicole was incredibly lucky, as death was only millimeters away from 2 bullets. One passed near an artery and the other nearly struck her heart. When Nicole regained consciousness, she reported to the police that her ex-lover, Timothy, was the one who had shot her. The police interrogated Timothy, who had a solid alibi since he was at the family center with his son at the time of the attack, as confirmed by staff and internal surveillance footage. The investigation also explored the possibility that someone among the criminals Nicole had previously arrested might have organized the attack. 4 casings were found at the scene, and a camera at the nearest intersection captured a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup running a red light without license plates. An eyewitness reported seeing the same vehicle, which led the police to check what vehicles Timothy owned. During another interrogation, Timothy mentioned owning a Chevrolet Traverse SUV and a Dodge Challenger, but not a pickup. However, the investigation revealed that Timothy was lying, and a black Dodge Ram, identical to the one used by the shooter, was registered in his name. When shown the surveillance footage, Timothy admitted to owning the pickup, but claimed he rarely used it. The vehicle was equipped with colorful stickers, which were verified, but appeared to have been applied recently. While all the evidence was circumstantial, the police needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully resolve the case. It was discovered that Timothy's vehicle had a satellite navigation system, allowing the tracing of the vehicle's entire route. The system revealed that the car was brought to the back entrance of a Tando school on the evening of April 18th, where it remained all night and almost the entire next day. Road cameras traced the vehicle's route, showing it arrived with license plates. The evening after the incident, the car used in the crime was found. but without the perpetrators. The person who drove the car that day was short and slender, with a feminine silhouette from a distance. As a result, the police decided to detain and question Amma's live-in girlfriend, Colin Larson. A search of their home was also conducted, and although the weapon used in the crime was not found, the police discovered ammunition of the same caliber. Colin, who was frightened, soon began to give confessional testimony, confirming that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. However, Colin believed that Timothy had acted with good intentions, thinking they were trying to save little Callahan from a cruel mother. Timothy had spent years manipulating Colin, convincing her that the boy was being mistreated and subjected to violence, and she unquestioningly believed every word. She felt sorry for the child and believed that Timothy wanted to protect him. The trial of the conspirators began in November of the same year. Colin confessed that Timothy had provided her with the firearm and had taken it back after the assassination attempt, but she didn't know what he did with it. The prosecution was largely built on circumstantial evidence, but Colin's confession was the decisive factor. The court also considered the testimony of the victim, Nicole, about Timothy's manipulative nature and his ability to deceive the women who loved him. Timothy Amma was found guilty of organizing a first-degree attempted murder, as well as incitement and aiding and abetting, and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Colin Larson received 16 years in prison as the executive. A year after the assassination attempt, Nicole fully recovered physically and emotionally. She and Donovan officially legalized their relationship, and he became a loving father to Callahan. The now married Ford couple is expecting their first child together, and the woman who saved Nicole's life will be the child's godmother. It should be added that Timothy will be eligible for parole in 2035, but he will be prohibited from coming within 100 meters of his son, former lover, and her family members, and from attempting any form of contact to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Wilson. Lindsay Wilson was a kind-hearted and empathetic person who wanted to love and be loved. Her primary mistake was failing to recognize her partner's true nature in time. As time passed, she struggled to escape from their codependent relationship. Lindsay's story began when she discovered she was pregnant at 17. Raised in a loving family, she wasn't emotionally unprepared, but her boyfriend's abandonment scared her. Lindsay was aware that motherhood would bring physical and financial challenges. She was relieved to meet Mitchell, who seemed like a gentleman, attentive and caring, and didn't shy away from her despite her pregnancy. However, his true nature would eventually be exposed, leading to devastating consequences. Mitchell fell in love with Lindsay at first sight and wanted to spend his life with her, raising her child as his own. He worked hard to provide for her, even taking extra hours to ensure she wanted for nothing. However, their 5-week-old relationship shocked their parents, who felt they were rushing into marriage. Despite their doubts, they got married in August 1995, surrounded by Lindsay's family and only a few of Mitchell's relatives. Lindsay's family noticed that Mitchell was overly sweet and polite, but they kept their misgivings to themselves. The newlyweds had a dispute on their wedding night, which left a bad impression on Lindsay's relatives. Mitchell's behavior became increasingly controlling and violent. Lindsay sought psychological support and reported the abuse, but her husband would answer the door and phone calls, preventing her from contacting her social worker. The social worker, concerned for Lindsay's safety, reported her missing in February 1999. The police visited the address but were unable to speak with Lindsay, and Mitchell claimed she had left him for another man. The search for Lindsay began, and her relatives reported that they last saw her on December 11th, appearing happy and healthy. Her mother had tried to reach her on December 24th, but was told by Mitchell that she had left with friends accused of infidelity. Detectives were puzzled by the fact that no one had expressed concern about Lindsay's well-being for 2 months. It was clear that Mitchell had isolated her from the outside world, including her close relatives. Although they had previously struggled to communicate with her, it was possible for Lindsay to go unnoticed for a while. However, this didn't mean her family wasn't worried. The news of her disappearance was alarming to everyone. They all described Lindsay as a modest person who didn't drink, and Mitchell had restricted her contact with friends and acquaintances. There were many inconsistencies in Mitchell's story, which contradicted his character profile and raised the investigators' suspicions. It seemed unlikely that Mitchell would simply let his wife go, and that Lindsay would leave her children with a tyrannical husband. The situation merited a thorough investigation, so the police spoke with all of Lindsay's acquaintances, trying to find anyone who had seen her after the family gathering. They questioned neighbors and requested surveillance footage from the residential complex where they lived. Unfortunately, all footage had been deleted by the time Lindsay's disappearance was reported. However, another date was discovered when she was last seen in person on December 15th at the local post office, sending several letters and postcards. Her older sister also admitted that they met that day, despite Mitchell's disapproval. The sisters had tea together, and during their brief conversation, Lindsay slipped a note into her sister's hand, asking her to read it later. The sister put the note in her purse and forgot about it in the whirlwind of days. Regrettably, she couldn't find it later, and its contents remain unknown. After that day, no one saw Lindsay again for several months. Investigators tried to hold on to any information they could, suspecting that she was no longer alive due to her prolonged absence. They couldn't charge Mitchell without sufficient grounds and evidence, but the more they learned about Thay's life history, the stronger their suspicions grew. They had married shortly after their wedding and moved away from their parents, renting an apartment in Southport. Later, Lindsay gave birth to a daughter named Robin. The only shadow over the new baby's joy was her stepfather's volatile temper. After moving, the young wife fully experienced her husband's unstable moods. One moment, he could be joking and laughing. The next, he became unbalanced and aggressive. She tried to maintain a fragile peace at home, but didn't realize how completely she had submitted to his will. He controlled every step she took and caused a scene whenever she failed to hear the phone or answer a call. Loud arguments were often followed by passionate reconciliations, with Mitchell kneeling, begging for forgiveness, and professing his love. For a while, it seemed that peace had returned to the family, but then the cycle would start again. Conflict, reconciliation, repetition. Lindsay began to lose recognition of the man she loved. She often told her relatives about what was happening, and they advised her to return home and end her suffering. It was hard for the young woman to admit her mistake. In one interview, the Wilsons mentioned that she always lived with thoughts of the past. Each time her husband assured her he would change and everything would be fine. As a loving wife, she wanted to believe him and waited for him to return to his former self, gentle and caring. Meanwhile, Mitchell increasingly tightened his grip and control, forbidding his wife to go out alone in the evenings and eventually restricting her from being anywhere without him. He was jealous of her every move, yet he himself was seen in dubious liaisons. Lindsay confided in her older sister about her suspicions of her husband Mitchell's infidelity. She shared an incident where a woman came to their home looking for him and was shocked to learn he was married. This led to an argument that escalated into physical violence. From then on, physical abuse became a regular part of their life as Mitchell sought to control Lindsay and maintain his reputation. Mitchell began to isolate Lindsay from her neighbors, friends, and family, despite her efforts to secretly maintain contact with them. Lindsay stayed in the marriage because Mitchell provided a comfortable life, financially supporting her and their child. However, when she discovered she was pregnant again, she knew she didn't want more children and decided to terminate the pregnancy. When Mitchell found out, he became enraged, hurling insults and physically intimidating her. Lindsay packed her things, took her child, and returned to her parents' home. Her family was relieved, and she proceeded with the pregnancy termination as planned. Over time, she began to miss Mitchell, who frequently called and begged her to come back. Mitchell eventually convinced Lindsay to give him another chance, and initially, everything seemed to go well. However, his severe anger outbursts continued, and he destroyed their apartment, leading to them being evicted. They had to take out a large loan and move to a more modest apartment. Their relationship continued to deteriorate, with Mitchell frequently leaving home for days or weeks at a time. Lindsay grew accustomed to his behavior, but eventually filed for divorce and returned to her parents' home. She realized she couldn't cope with the separation on her own and reached out to a local charity that assisted women in difficult situations. With their help, Lindsay found subsidized housing in another city and took measures to distance herself from Mitchell, including obtaining a restraining order. She began to rebuild her life, started a journal, and sought therapy. Despite her precautions, Mitchell discovered her phone number and began calling her, demanding to see their son. Lindsay, who had been feeling lonely, reunited with Mitchell despite her relatives' and friends' disapproval. They began living together again, which shocked those who cared about her. However, Mitchell remained unpopular with them, and they eventually stopped communicating with Lindsay, believing she had returned to an abusive relationship. This decision ultimately proved fatal. Initially, Mitchell was cooperative during the investigation into Lindsay's disappearance. However, as the case gained media attention, he shifted his focus and became a public figure, inviting journalists into his home. His numerous media appearances seemed insincere, with some viewers noticing a smirk on his face. Lindsay's parents and detectives viewed Mitchell as the prime suspect, but the lack of direct evidence hindered their efforts. Searches were conducted at their home and throughout the area, but Mitchell continued to appear in the media, even declaring that Lindsay's family would one day apologize for their suspicions. On the eve of the holiday season, Mitchell sent a postcard to the lead investigator with a pack of hair dye, mocking the detective and displaying his arrogance. The investigation team responded by hinting that Mitchell was not who he claimed to be, tarnishing his reputation. In February 2000, it was discovered that Mitchell had been forging Lindsay's signature to receive social benefits, which indirectly implicated him in her disappearance. Despite the financial motive, Mitchell's popularity worked in his favor, and many supporters argued that he, as a single father, deserved financial assistance. These circumstances hindered the detectives' ability to bring charges, but they eventually accused Mitchell of fraud. He was found guilty and sentenced to community service. However, Mitchell's popularity began to wane as the forgery of his missing wife's signature appeared suspicious. The number of angry comments increased, and Mitchell eventually snapped, blaming the media for intruding into his personal life. The case might have remained unsolved had it not been for a chance discovery on June 1, 2000, when a parkgoer noticed their dog acting strangely near a roller coaster. Human remains were uncovered, and forensic examination confirmed they belonged to Lindsay Key. This breakthrough revitalized the investigation, making it clear that Lindsay was a victim of a brutal crime. The focus shifted to finding the perpetrator, and on June 7, Mitchell was brought in for questioning. After 36 hours of intermittent interrogation, the suspect broke down and confessed to dismembering and murdering Lindsay on December 15, 1998. Mitchell told authorities that Lindsay had informed him of her decision to file for divorce earlier that day, which enraged him and led him to attack and strangle her in front of their children. He then hid her lifeless body in their bedroom, using a gap under the door to conceal any odors. Realizing he needed help to dispose of the body, he enlisted the assistance of his brother Elliot, a butcher, who was initially hesitant but eventually persuaded. While the children played in the next room, Mitchell and Elliot dismembered Lindsay's body and later dispersed her remains across the city. During his confession, Mitchell showed no remorse or empathy, instead seeming proud of his actions and stating that without his confession, they would never have proven his guilt. The next day, he led authorities to the other locations where he had hidden her limbs, although her head and one hand were never recovered. Forensic comparison confirmed that the remains were indeed Lindsay, leaving no doubt about Mitchell's guilt. The trial of the Key brothers took place in January 2001, with Mitchell being found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 17 years. A court-appointed psychiatrist noted that Mitchell showed signs of being a narcissist with sadistic tendencies. His brother Elliot received a 7-year sentence for his role in concealing the crime. Lindsay's children were taken in by her maternal grandparents, who gave them their surname. 3 months after the sentence was handed down, another tragedy struck the Wilson family when one of Lindsay's older brothers, unable to cope with the shock, took his own life in the attic of their family home. As of 2017, Mitchell Key has been eligible for parole, but his lawyers have been denied 3 times. The Wilson family, including the children, are concerned that the murderer might eventually be released and have started a petition urging that he remain incarcerated. In an interview, Mr. Wilson mentioned hearing rumors that his former relative had attempted to end his life and added that he sincerely hopes the murderer will try again and succeed this time. He also commented on the prevalence of domestic Stockholm syndrome, where victims often adapt to their abusers throughout their lives, even when they're... Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lamu. Lamu was born in 1990 in Nyawa, Tibet, Sichuan Province, China. She was the youngest of 3 children in a very poor family that barely made ends meet. She grew up with her older biological sister and stepbrother in a home shared with their parents and grandmother. The family collected rare medicinal plants, which they sold in local pharmacies for a meager income. After completing only 3 grades, Lama had to leave school to work with her family members and help support them. Along with the adults, she climbed high into the mountains to find rare herbs and flowers with healing properties. Lama was well-versed in these plants and had a deep love for nature, admiring its beauty and generosity. As social media popularity grew, she created her own account on a Chinese equivalent of TikTok, where she posted short videos showcasing her daily life, household activities, and the beauty of her native province. She called herself a mountain girl and had a deep affection for her work. Unlike many bloggers, she wasn't chasing fame. Instead, fame found her. Her audience adored Lamu for her smile, purity, and childlike spontaneity. Lamu never prepared content in advance, speaking her mind and feelings, and sometimes singing folk songs while showcasing the mountain landscapes. She never used makeup or filters, and her hands and feet bore calluses, scratches, and scars, visibly evidencing the hard and long labor behind them. Gradually, Lamu's subscriber count grew, and not only locals, but also tourists visiting the area began to recognize her. They referred to the blogger as that sweet mountain girl, offering warm words, expressing gratitude for her work, and asking for photos. Lamu was not proud of her fame, but was delighted that her activities resonated with the audience and brought joy to others. Lamu's personal life was marred by her abusive husband, Tong Li. For many years, she suffered at his hands, enduring beatings and humiliations, but tried not to show her deep unhappiness. Tong Li was born in 1990 in Sichuan Province, China, into a simple and modest family. His parents adored him and spoiled him from an early age. At 12, he quit school and started working as a courier, earning little but keeping all the money to himself. This marked the beginning of his greedy, arrogant, and selfish nature. As a teenager, Tong began dealing in banned substances, stealing, and gambling, and took pride in getting away with it. He aimed to earn respect in the criminal underworld, become rich, and escape poverty. At 15, he left home and joined a gang, engaging in illegal activities. Meanwhile, Tong's parents opened a successful spice and tea shop, investing all their efforts and resources into it. When the business took off, Tong returned home, offering to help expand and promote the family business. In reality, he just wanted to live off his relatives' hard work. Tong considered himself successful and wealthy, spending money on personal luxuries and boasting to friends about his expensive items. He even claimed the store's success as his own, while his family worked hard daily. He maintained a separate under-the-table business with local criminals. Lamu and Tong met when they were 17. Tong was enchanted by her beauty, kindness, and sincerity, and courted her earnestly, giving gifts and promising to change for her. Lamu quickly fell for his charms, believing she had met her Prince Charming. They developed a romantic relationship that lasted almost 2 years before they decided to make it official. Tong proposed to Lamu when he turned 19, and she eagerly accepted. However, their parents were not thrilled about their decision to marry, believing they were too young to start a family. Lamu moved into her mother-in-law's house, but soon, Tong started disappearing with his old friends again. He returned to his unlawful activities, frequently consumed alcohol, and his behavior towards his wife changed drastically. Tong became crude, self-centered, and aggressive, taking a portion of the store's earnings and spending all the money on his own needs. Lamu and her husband Tong's relationship started to deteriorate. They frequently argued, with Lamu urging him to change his ways, give up drinking, and stop associating with criminals. However, Tong refused to listen, believing no one had the right to tell him what to do. Their home became a battleground with conflicts erupting daily. Even when Lamu became pregnant, the situation didn't improve. One day, Tong's behavior shocked Lamu. She declared she would return to her parents' home, refusing to tolerate his treatment. Her mother-in-law, who had witnessed the incident, intervened, scolding her son and telling him he had no right to treat Lamu that way. The mother-in-law convinced Lamu to stay, promising that the abuse would stop. Lamu believed her and gave her husband another chance, a decision she would later regret. The abuse continued, with Tong regularly becoming physically violent, only to apologize afterward, begging Lamu not to leave him. Each time, Lamu wanted to believe he had changed, but the cycle repeated over and over. When she finally decided to leave, Tong threatened to take their son away and harm her and her parents. Fearing for her safety, Lamu stayed. Their child became Tong's tool for manipulation and blackmail. Lamu kept her nightmare hidden from her relatives, including her close older sister. After her mother's passing in 2012, Lamu found herself managing her parents' household and caring for her elderly father and grandmother. She continued to climb mountains to gather herbs, using the time to escape her husband's wrath and find solace in her thoughts. In 2017, Lamu gave birth to a second son, but her relations with Tong remained strained. Her mother-in-law stopped intervening on her behalf. Around the same time, Lamu created a social media account, posting videos about local beauty, flowers, and herbs. She gained a large following who admired her work and knowledge of traditional Chinese medicine. Her online presence became an outlet for her to express herself and momentarily escape her difficult reality. Lamu kept her domestic violence a secret, never complaining to her audience about her situation. However, when her grandmother passed away in 2019, she posted a video expressing her grief. Her followers supported her, unlike her husband, who became furious and struck her. Lamu finally decided to leave her abusive husband in January 2020 after enduring another violent incident. She took her sons and moved back to her parents' home, filing for divorce. At first, she felt calm and confident, despite trying to hide a large bruise under her eye. However, the court's decision to divide custody of the sons, leaving the younger child with her and the older with her ex-husband, was a devastating blow. During the divorce proceedings, her ex-husband suddenly changed his tactics, romantically pursuing her again and proposing they start over and not break up the family. For a couple of months, he pretended to be a repentant man, giving her flowers, creating celebrations, helping around the house, and even joining her on trips. Lamu's heart softened, and she believed he had genuinely changed. By the end of March, they were married, but the fairy tale ended soon after Lamu returned to her husband's house. he reverted to being cruel, mean, and selfish, brutally attacking her nearly to death within 2 weeks of remarrying. He snatched her phone, hurled it against the wall, and battered her mercilessly. Lamu fled the house, barefoot, and went to the police, seeking protection. However, they only took her statement and advised her to resolve the family conflict on her own. Lamu decided to hide in another village to avoid endangering her relatives. Her enraged husband was ready to end her life, but didn't know where to find her. He assumed she might have gone to her sister's house, so he visited and began yelling, demanding to know where Lamu was. When her sister claimed ignorance, he struck her repeatedly, fracturing her cheekbone, eye socket, and nose. After the Lamu's sister filed a police report, Lamu's ex-husband was finally held accountable, but not arrested. During the second divorce proceedings, the court left both sons with the father, as the wealthy Lee family's influence proved to be the deciding factor. The heartbroken mother was crushed with grief. 3 weeks after the second divorce, Lamu went to the mountains, recorded a video of herself singing and dancing, trying to relieve stress. However, her ex-husband interpreted it as her celebrating their separation, which blinded him with rage. On the evening of September 14, 2020, Lamu started a live stream, chatting with her followers while dressed in a traditional Tibetan outfit, softly singing folk songs. Suddenly, a terrible noise erupted off camera, as if someone had kicked the door in. Lamu turned pale, frozen in fear, staring at the person entering. She jumped up, trying to escape, but the tripod with her smartphone fell, camera down. Viewers could only hear the heavy footsteps, the sound of a liquid splashing on the floor and walls, and Lamu screaming for help. Her father's voice pleaded with the intruder to calm down and put down the knife. Lamu warned her family that the room was doused in gasoline and begged them to save themselves. A sinister silence fell, followed by the click of a lighter and a piercing scream. The broadcast cut off as the crackle of flames spreading through the room grew louder. Followers were left stunned, refusing to accept that they had just witnessed a tragedy. It was not a prank, unfortunately. The worst had occurred. Tong had brutally exacted revenge on his ex-wife, Lamu, for leaving him. He rode a motorcycle to her house, bringing a canister of gasoline and a large knife. Through the windows, he saw Lamu in the kitchen on the ground floor and kicked the door open. Lamu was caught off guard, barely understanding what was happening before she tried to flee. Tong prevented her escape, dousing her with fuel and wounding her with the knife before setting the house on fire. At that moment, her father and brother ran outside, shouting for neighbors to help, but they did not understand the gravity of the situation as the flames erupted. Lamu's relatives rushed back into the house, but the old wooden beams were burning like torches, blocking the entrance. Miraculously, firefighters took about 2 hours to extinguish the fire. When they entered, they found Lamu in the room, her skin charred black and literally melted to the floor. Incredibly, Lamu was still breathing, with a faint pulse detectable. She was rushed to the hospital, where doctors were horrified by her condition. Over 90% of her body surface was burned, and her lungs had nearly cooked from the heated air and smoke. Despite her critical condition, Lamu desperately continued to fight for her life. She was in a deep coma, and her condition was deemed critical. The city's burn center was prepared to help, but the treatment cost was a staggering $1,000,000, a sum her family could not afford after losing everything in the fire. Lamu's father decided to seek help from her followers, writing a letter explaining that her ex-husband had attacked her, attempting to end her life, but she had survived, and doctors held out a slim hope. The letter was posted on her social account, along with a plea from her sister to all compassionate people to help Lamu, providing an account number for donations. The necessary funds for treatment were raised within an hour of the post, and people continued to send money. Lamu was transferred to the burn center, where she received the necessary care, and her condition was stabilized. At one point, it seemed she might recover. Tragically, after 2 weeks of fighting for her life, Lamu's heart could not endure any longer, and she passed away without regaining consciousness. She was only 30 years old. Tong was arrested the day after committing this heinous act. At the trial, his mother desperately defended her son, who had inflicted such cruelty, claiming that he did it out of intense love for his ex-wife and stress from their divorce. Nevertheless, the verdict was severe and just. The court found Tong guilty of deliberate cruel deprivation of life and sentenced him to death. Additionally, the court mandated his family to compensate Lamu's relatives for the property loss due to the house fire. Tong attempted to appeal the verdict several times, but the decision remained unchanged. In July 2022, the sentence was carried out and Tong Li was executed. 2 years after the tragic event that ended Lamu's life, her relatives rebuilt the house on the site of the burned one and were able to move. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Liga Skromaine. Liga Skromaine was born in 1986 in Latvia, where she grew up in a close-knit family with an older brother and a younger sister. She later moved to Ireland but remained close to her family. It was there that she met her future husband, Andrew Jordan. Despite struggling to connect with new people, the couple married 5 years later and shared big plans for their future. Liga worked at a hotel and lived modestly, but dreamed of opening a yoga retreat center in Portugal. Andrew supported her idea, and they saved money for 4 years to make it a reality. In early 2018, Liga was suffering from a severe skin condition that was affecting her physical and mental well-being. Her sister Ilse invited her on a trip to help her overcome this condition and regain her emotional balance. In February 2018, Liga and Ilse traveled to Thiruvananthapuram, the capital of Kerala, India, where Liga could receive Ayurvedic treatment for depression. Ayurveda, recognized by the World Health Organization since 1985 as one of the most effective alternative medicine systems, offered a promising solution for Liga's health issues. It's important to note that Ayurveda is not a cure-all, but rather a complementary approach to achieving healthy longevity. Liga, 33, and her sister Ilse traveled to Kerala seeking spiritual growth and relief from depression at an Ayurveda center. Their 6-week treatment plan included yoga, meditation, herbal remedies, and personalized nutrition and massage guidance. On March 14th, Liga skipped a yoga class, citing a headache. When Ilse returned to their room, Liga was gone. With the hotel staff's help, Ilse discovered that Liga had left the hotel at 11:30 a.m. in casual clothing, taking an auto rickshaw to Kovalam Beach for a walk. However, Liga was nowhere to be found on the beach, despite Ilse's thorough search until nightfall. Ilse reported her sister's disappearance to the police, but they showed little concern, believing Liga would either be found or return on her own the next day. Although they registered a case, the investigation was sluggish, effectively stalled from the start. Ilse took her sister Liga on a trip to India to share with her the country she loved so deeply. Tragically, the trip took a devastating turn. When the Indian police failed to take action for several days, Ilse decided to take matters into her own hands and began searching for Liga. She received support from friends and also informed her husband Andrew about Liga's disappearance, prompting him to fly to India immediately. After Liga went missing, her husband Andrew Jordan and sister Ilse launched a campaign to find her, reaching out to the local press and creating an online appeal. Ilse also tweeted to India's Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj, pleading for help and offering a 100,000 rupee reward to anyone with information about Liga's disappearance. Ilse and her friend Alexa, who had flown to India to help with the search, put up posters and distributed flyers in the Kovalam Beach area where Liga was last seen. Many locals joined the search efforts. However, it's important to note that Liga struggled with depression and found it difficult to interact with strangers. On the day she vanished, she took an auto rickshaw to the beach and was never seen again. At the time, she had about 3,000 rupees with her, but no passport, which meant she couldn't leave the country. Ashok Kumar, the head of the local police station, claimed that they had no leads in Liga's disappearance. Initially, the police believed she might have gone on a drinking binge or eloped and would eventually return on her own. However, persistent requests for help from Ilse and Andrew prompted the police to launch a search operation in the Kovalam Beach area where Liga was last seen. Although a woman's body was found washed ashore in Kanyakumari district, it was not identified as Liga's. Andrew suspected that Liga had been kidnapped by local gangs to be sold, and he attempted to infiltrate these gangs to gather more information. However, he was exposed and warned that if he continued to contact the gangs, he would have to leave the country. A month after Liga's disappearance, there were still no leads to her whereabouts. Ilse continued to search for her sister, visiting Kovalam Beach daily and observing people. She developed a theory that the only way to leave the beach unnoticed was by boat. Andrew returned to India on April 17, 2018, and joined Ilse in a new effort to find Liga, but her body remained unfound. The search for Liga was made more challenging due to her being a tourist and a citizen of another country. The Latvian Foreign Ministry maintained close contact with Liga's family and collaborated with the Indian authorities throughout the search process. The Latvian embassy also reached out to the Indian Foreign Ministry for special assistance in finding Liga. Additionally, the honorary consul of Latvia in India, whose jurisdiction includes the region where Liga went missing, was involved in the search efforts. At the request of the Coral State government, the Indian Navy and Air Force participated in the search operation. The search effort was extensive, utilizing an AN-32 transport plane, Gemini inflatable boats, underwater sonar, and 5 deep-sea divers. Unfortunately, despite these efforts, Liga remained missing and the desired outcome was not achieved. By this point, everyone in the local community was aware of the missing tourist from Latvia and was supporting and sympathizing with Andrew and Ilse. On April 20, 2018, Ila received the most awaited yet devastating call of her life. A body had been found in the mangrove jungle. She and Andrew rushed to the designated spot where the police were waiting to take them to the scene by boat. Elsa's heart was racing as she felt the overwhelming horror of the situation. As they arrived, Elsa was met with a gruesome sight. She recognized her sister's clothes, including the shirt and leggings, on the body. However, the jacket and shoes did not belong to Liga. It remained a mystery how Liga had ended up in this remote location, accessible only by going through Panatur from Samudra Beach. 2 women came forward, confirming that they had seen Liga traveling alone into the mangrove forest. But the question remained, why would a girl struggling with depression, already alone, take a boat to such a remote and inaccessible place in the forest? The body was taken to the Medical College Hospital for an autopsy, which was recorded on video. The police stated that they couldn't confirm the identity of the body until DNA analysis was complete. According to the city police commissioner, the body was severely mutilated, with the head found nearby. Although the police have tentatively identified the deceased as Liga, a missing tourist, they need DNA confirmation. Supporting the investigators' conclusion is the fact that Liga's relatives identified the victim by her hair and clothes. One possible theory, according to India's rescue services, is that Liga might have been poisoned by accidentally or intentionally eating the fruit of poisonous pong trees found in the mangrove forest. Between 1989 and 1999, over 500 people died from poisoning by these fruits in Kerala alone. The idea initially seemed absurd, given the body was found hanging upside down, without a head. However, if Liga had been poisoned, her body would likely have been in a different position, and her head would have been in place. Indian authorities were spouting absurdities based on misinformation about Liga's complex psychological issues. The investigators also considered the possibility that Liga had willingly abandoned her life. Ilse was concerned that the police would try to cover up her sister's murder by claiming she had voluntarily ended her life, despite the presence of a rope at the scene, which suggested the hiker had hanged herself. Elsa demanded a credible explanation for the missing head, and Ilse sarcastically retorted, "Don't tell me it's just lost." Here are the forensic test results that Ilse and the public were waiting for. The evidence is overwhelming. The autopsy reveals that Liga Skoma was strangled to death by multiple people during a violent attack. There were blood pools in her brain, bruising on her neck, and external injuries on her body, likely sustained during the struggle. Although the body was decomposing, the characteristic injuries on her throat cartilage indicate that someone forcefully squeezed her throat. The trauma was severe and fatal. Blood clots in her brain confirm strangulation, and bruises were found on her neck and legs, with a total of 9 wounds recorded on her body. Based on the autopsy results, the police no longer consider Liga's death to be voluntary. Instead, they believe she was murdered after putting up a struggle. Ilse, Liga's sister, felt a sense of relief that the police were now taking the case seriously and hoped they would soon find the killers. As part of their investigation, the police started questioning local drug dealers and card players. They also spoke to local residents, 2 of whom reported seeing Liga walking alone to the area where her body was later discovered. However, the police had doubts about the credibility of these eyewitnesses. Liga's family has criticized the Indian police, accusing them of incompetence. They believe that if the police had launched a search for Liga immediately, the tragedy might have been prevented. The 33-year-old Latvian tourist is thought to have been kidnapped from a nearby beach, taken by boat, and then strangled. A special team of investigators has been formed to find those responsible for the crime. So far, around 40 suspects have been questioned, and arrests are expected to be made in the coming days once the authorities have gathered sufficient evidence. The Indian police conducted an investigation that led to the arrest of 2 men who were accused of murdering Liga Skron. According to the police, Liga Skron was lured by the 2 men, who then subjected her to physical abuse before dismembering her body. The 2 alleged assailants, now in custody, were local dealers of illegal substances. Both suspects, who were also pimps, fully confessed to the crime while under interrogation. However, the autopsy did not provide much evidence due to the advanced state of decomposition of Liga Skron's body. Andrew Jordan filed a petition in Superior Court to review a felony murder case, suspecting that more people were involved in the woman's murder. He noted that both defendants had recanted their guilty pleas, suggesting that they may have confessed due to torture, a common practice in India. However, the Supreme Court of India denied the murdered woman's common-law husband a review of the case, citing a lack of direct evidence. Andrew was outraged when the trial was postponed for 2 months. He had previously accused the authorities and police of incompetence and attempting to cover up the murder to avoid scaring off tourists. The suspect's lawyers requested and received a postponement, which they are legally entitled to do once without providing a reason. Andrew believed that the more the case was delayed, the more likely it was that the investigation was flawed. Despite his concerns, both suspects remained in custody. An investigation into Liga Skron's murder revealed that 2 men, Umesh, 32, and Udayakumar, 28, offered her drugs, specifically Ligascani weed, and then strangled and decapitated her after she was incapacitated. The 2 suspects were arrested and found to have a history of committing similar crimes on multiple occasions. They worked for a food delivery company in Kerala's capital city and moonlighted as illegal tour guides. Umesh and Udayakumar have been charged with multiple crimes, including destruction of evidence, murder, poisoning, kidnapping, and rape. The location where Liga's body was discovered had previously been used by Umesh as a meeting spot for his male clients. He has a long history of criminal activity, with 13 cases filed against him, including 6 for sexual assault and 1 for attempted murder. Several of Umesh's victims have come forward to testify against him. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Liga with the 2 men in the area. Initially, they denied any involvement, but after Liga's body was found, they confessed to the murder, which was committed during an act of violence. The suspects were arrested, but initially claimed they only saw Liga in Kovalam. After repeated questioning, they eventually pleaded guilty. On December 6, 2022, the court sentenced the two men to life in prison and ordered them to pay 65,000 rupees each in compensation to Ilsa, Liga's sister. India has seen a surge in violent crimes against young girls, with a high number of sexual offenses committed against minors. In response, the government has introduced the death penalty to address the acute problem of crime in the country. The persistence of Liga's relatives, particularly her sister, and the involvement of the press and an influential MP were crucial in ensuring the case was final. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nathan and Crystal Maddox. Nathan and Crystal Maddox grew up on neighboring streets, fell in love, and later got married when Crystal became pregnant. Despite initial disapproval from Crystal's parents, they eventually accepted the relationship and even let the young couple get married. After their wedding, Nathan and Crystal started a family, having a daughter named Madison. However, their life was far from perfect. Nathan had to work hard to support his family, often traveling to Montana for work. Despite the distance, he remained devoted to his family, regularly sending money and visiting whenever possible. But one day, Nathan returned home from Montana to find his house empty and a note from Crystal saying she was leaving him. She claimed she didn't know where he was or when he would return, which was a lie, as Nathan had been regularly updating her on his whereabouts. The worst part was that she took their daughter Madison with her and even went to the police station, falsely accusing Nathan of neglecting his child in order to gain full custody. Nathan tried to visit his daughter Madison, but her mother's family, the Westfalls, kept pushing him away, relieved to be rid of him. Years passed, and Nathan returned to his hometown to be close to Madison. He didn't give up trying to see her, but he knew he needed a lawyer to get official custody and legal visitation rights. During this time, Nathan met Crystal, an old friend from childhood. They had gone to school together, but their paths diverged when Crystal moved to the city to attend university. However, she got married and started a family instead of pursuing a career. After her divorce, Crystal returned to her hometown with her 4 children. Nathan was immediately drawn to Crystal's energy and optimism. They got married in 2013, and Nathan worked at a warehouse while Crystal started a clothing business and opened a children's boutique. The family was doing well, and they could finally afford a good lawyer to help Nathan get custody of Madison. Madison was thrilled with her father's new family, including Crystal and her siblings. This made Kristen's parents, Lita and Paula Westfall, very resentful and afraid of losing their granddaughter. In 2012, Kristen had applied for full custody of Madison, and the battle dragged on for 2 years. However, Crystal's presence in Nathan's life changed everything. With a stable family and a good job, Nathan was granted visitation rights, and he was ecstatic. In October 2013, the judge allowed supervised visits with Madison. On January 18, 2014, Nathan and Crystal attended a Sunday service at Mount Carmel Church, planning to take Madison for a walk afterwards. But as they left the church, 3 loud shots were heard. Nathan and Crystal were shot and killed, shocking the small town. The police investigation revealed that Nathan and Crystal were shot in the head with a .30 caliber rifle, and Nathan was also shot in the thigh with a 20-gauge shotgun, indicating that there were 2 shooters. The investigation continued, with interviews of witnesses, acquaintances, and relatives, including Kristen's family. The Westfalls' behavior shocked investigators. Instead of grieving Nathan's death, they seemed to be hiding their joy. Paul Westfall even faked a seizure, claiming he was too shocked to believe the news. It was clear they were involved in the murder, but the motive remained unknown. Kristen was the first to be interviewed, and her demeanor was eerily calm, and that despite her long history with Nathan and their shared child. She provided strange details about him, only highlighting the negative aspects of their relationship. Kristen claimed she knew who killed him, mentioning that Nathan had been involved with dangerous motorcycle gangs in Montana. One gang member had even threatened to kill him at his mother's house. Although this story checked out, it turned out to be an empty threat due to a broken motorcycle. As an alibi, Kristen said she was at the grocery store with her father, Paul, on the day of the crime. Surveillance footage confirmed their presence at 10:57 a.m. Paul told the same story, but as a hunter with access to firearms, his hands were tested for gunpowder residue, which came back negative. However, his reaction to Nathan's death seemed suspicious, leaving a sliver of doubt about his sincerity. Further investigation revealed that Nathan was involved in a bitter custody battle with Kristen over their daughter. He was close to gaining custody, which the Westfall family strongly opposed. This desperate battle might have been a motive for the murder, but the police had no concrete evidence to arrest anyone. The family consisted of 4 people, and 2 of them were the shooters. Investigators were yet to figure out who pulled the trigger or if they had hired a killer. Focusing on the key player in the controversy, Madison Maddox, the police decided to act. They removed her from the home, citing safety concerns, and searched the house. The search yielded disturbing results. A gun was easily accessible, and illegal drugs were scattered around the house. In 2013, Kristen was arrested and charged with possessing a controlled substance. Despite this, she continued to live with her parents and daughter, defying court orders. In 2014, Child Protective Services discovered a used syringe with illegal substances and a gun on Kristen's nightstand, leading to Madison being taken into temporary custody. The authorities wanted to place Madison in foster care due to the presence of illegal substances and a gun in the Westfall home. However, there was no direct evidence linking the Westfalls to the Maddox murder, and cross-examinations did not produce the desired results. To pressure the Westfalls, the police focused on 18-year-old Cameron, the most vulnerable family member. They threatened him with life imprisonment for his family and the death penalty for the direct killers if he didn't cooperate. Fearing for his family, Cameron agreed to work with the investigation and revealed the details of the crime. The murder of the young couple, Maddox, was carefully planned by the Westfall family to eliminate Nathan from his role as father. This was due to a bitter custody dispute between Nathan and his ex-wife, Kristen, who had the support of her family. The Westfalls were determined to keep Madison from her father, and when the judge allowed Nathan multiple visitations, it became clear he could win the trial. Kristen and her family plotted a scheme to remove Nathan from Madison's life. They tried to find someone to kill him, but when that failed, Kristen and her father decided to do it themselves. On January 18th, the family attended church, and Kristen and Paul created an alibi by posing as customers at a distant store to get on CCTV cameras. Meanwhile, Lita Westfall, Kristen's mother, attended the church service with Madison and informed Paul of Nathan and Crystal's departure. She called 911 immediately after the murder. Cameron played a role in concealing the evidence, discarding the gun used in the murder near a remote church and at a lake. He later cooperated with authorities, revealing that Kristen came up with the idea and the family went along with it. The police arrested Kristen, her brother Cameron, and her parents, Paul and Lita Westfall, and charged them with organized crime. Kristen and Paul were the ones who pulled the trigger, while Cameron and Lita acted as willing accomplices. Although Lita was at the church during the incident, phone records showed she informed her daughter and husband of the couple's whereabouts. The trial was lengthy, with each member of the Westfall family tried separately. Paul Westfall was initially found mentally unfit, but was later deemed competent and faced the death penalty along with Lita. To avoid the death penalty, they agreed to a plea bargain with the DA's office. Paul Westfall took a plea bargain with the prosecution, pleading guilty to the charges and receiving a life sentence without parole. Lita Westfall, his wife, also took a plea bargain, pleading guilty to organized criminal activity. She will be eligible for parole in 2046 and is currently incarcerated at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville, Texas. Kristen Westphal, the daughter of Paul and Lita, pleaded not guilty to all charges against her, claiming her family was crazy and she was the only sane one. However, when her family members testified against her in court, she was unable to respond. The motive behind the murder of Nathan and Crystal Maddox was revealed to be custody of their 5-year-old daughter, Madison. Kristen did not want Nathan to have unrestricted access to Madison and wanted to control her father's communication with the child. The trial took over a week, and with overwhelming evidence against her, the jury found her guilty of capital murder in just 8 hours. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Cameron Westphal, the youngest member of the family, was charged with 2 counts of tampering with evidence. He pleaded guilty and received a deferred sentence, contingent upon him testifying against his family. He faced up to 10 years in prison on each charge. Although he claimed to have had no involvement in the actual shooting, phone records showed that his mother had texted her husband and daughter during the crime. Cameron is currently incarcerated at the Huntsville Correctional Facility in Texas and is expected to be released in 2025. The case was highly publicized and shook the community of Colmsnale, Texas, to its core. The Westphal family's brutal crime was committed outside Mount Carmel Baptist Church, where Nathan and Crystal Maddox were shot and killed in 2014. In 2016, a judge sentenced Cameron to 10 years in prison, and his mother received a life sentence the following year. Lloyd Paul was also sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to first-degree murder, which meant he could not appeal his sentence. Kristen Westphal, the mastermind behind the crime, received a life sentence without parole. The legal battle for custody of Madison Maddox, Kristen's daughter, continued even after the Westphal family was sentenced. Nathan Maddox's father, Jim, filed a petition to become the primary guardian of his granddaughter. It's worth noting that many people die in custody battles every year, and instead of making children happier, these battles often leave them with psychological problems. The Westphal family, who were devout churchgoers, were willing to kill to achieve their goals, hiding behind their concern for Madison. Nathan, Madison's father, was not a bad person and loved his daughter. However, his ex-wife Kristen was filled with hatred towards him, particularly because he had started a new family and found happiness with his new partner, Crystal. Kristen was able to manipulate her family against Nathan, leading to the tragic events that unfolded. The custody dispute started before Nathan and Crystal's relationship, and in the end, there is only one loser, Madison. Hopefully, when she grows up, she will not remember the selfishness of the adults who used her for their own gain, claiming to act out of love. If they truly loved her, they would have worked to build a normal relationship. I'm going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Lang. Michelle was an intelligent and motivated individual who enrolled in the University of Technology in Sydney, where she studied economics and hospitality management. She was an adventurous person who loved to travel, take risks, and explore new places. Her social media profiles revealed a vibrant personality who enjoyed posting photos and videos of her outings with friends. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Michelle posted videos and photos from her trips to various locations in New South Wales. On June 13, 2013, she visited Snapper Point, where she took a prophetic photo of herself on the edge of a cliff. Michelle was confident, outgoing, and had a busy life, balancing her studies with a part-time job and a social life. Michelle Lang went to a mall on April 2, 2016, and boarded a train after lunch. She got off at a station around 4:30 p.m. and was never seen again. 2 days later, her uncle went to the train station to meet his wife, who had returned from a business trip. And that's when they realized Michelle was missing. Her family became worried when they couldn't contact her, as she was always in daily contact with friends and family members living in China and Australia. They inspected her room, which was in complete order, and looked through her laptop, concluding that she hadn't returned from her day out. On April 24, 2016, a body was found by tourists at Snapper Point, and a compiled sketch of the victim confirmed it was Michelle. The police took 3 days to officially identify her and launch an investigation. The first theory was that Michelle had been attacked by an unknown person she had planned to meet that day. However, CCTV cameras showed Michelle was alone on the day of her disappearance, and her friends said she had no plans to meet anyone. An investigation into her social networks and correspondence found no evidence of a secret meeting. The autopsy revealed Michelle's body had multiple injuries, including stab wounds, indicating she had tried to fight off her attacker. The police believe she was brutally assaulted before her death, but it's unclear who could have attacked her in such a lonely area. Forensic evidence showed Michelle's body had been in the water for less than 48 hours, meaning it was likely dumped recently. The police studied CCTV and traffic cameras to determine Michelle's last movements and continued to interview her family members, friends, and co-workers for additional information. Police Inspector Gary Jubelin said Michelle was a responsible person who always stayed in touch with her family, which made her disappearance unusual. The police were suspicious of Derek Barrett, Michelle's uncle, who had been unemployed and often stayed up late, but they found no evidence linking him to the crime. The investigators began questioning Derek about his relationship with Michelle and asked him to recall the last time he had seen her. Under pressure, Derek refused to answer and demanded a lawyer. This suspicious behavior raised doubts, leading to his arrest as a suspect. Before the interrogation, investigators had checked Derek's cell phone signal and found that he was in the same area where Michelle's body was later discovered on April 24th. Surveillance footage from a parking lot also showed a car matching the description of Derek's vehicle in the early morning hours of April 24th. Despite Derek's denials, the footage proved his presence in the parking lot. The police charged Derek, 27, with the murder of 25-year-old Michelle Lang, whose naked body with multiple stab wounds was found in a hole on the central Nsworth coast. Michelle's family was left in shock, especially her mother, who was devastated by the news. Police released CCTV footage showing Michelle's last shopping trip in Sydney's central business district on April 21st. The footage showed her shopping at a Pitt Street mall and boarding a train at St. James Station. Police believe Michelle returned to her family home in the afternoon, where she lived with her uncle, aunt, and cousin. She was presumed to have been murdered at home. The autopsy revealed that Michelle had tried to fight off her attacker and was stabbed multiple times in defense. CCTV footage also captured a vehicle entering Lake Moan-Morick National Park at around 7 a.m. on April 24th, with Michelle's body believed to be inside. Despite Derek being detained and charged, the investigation continued, and further details of Michelle's final minutes surfaced. Additional charges were laid, including 5 counts of indecent assault, 2 counts of installing a filming device, and murder. The investigation revealed that Derek had an unhealthy sexual interest in his wife's young niece. Analysis of Derek's cell phone found previously deleted data, including files that left no doubt about his involvement in Michelle's death and his unhealthy interest in her. The phone contained images taken just before Michelle's death, showing her returning home on April 21st around 5 p.m. and sending her last text message around midnight. Derek had set up a hidden camera in the shared bathroom, which he regularly reviewed. The phone also contained images of Michelle taken before her death. It appeared that Derek had entered Michelle's room around midnight, attempting to take photos and videos of her while she was asleep. However, Michelle woke up, and Derek attacked her, tying her up and putting duct tape over her mouth. He kept her tied to the bed for 2 days, periodically abusing her and taking photos. Michelle was still alive on April 23rd when Derek took a picture of her around 8 a.m. Later that day, Derek's stepson came home twice but didn't hear Michelle's quiet moans because Derek was taking a shower at the time. Surveillance cameras showed that Derek left the apartment 4 times to take out the trash, presumably after Michelle had already died. During this time, Derek cleaned the house thoroughly, washing away any traces of blood and hiding evidence of the crime and Michelle's disappearance. The next day, April 24th, at 7 a.m., Derek drove to Snapper Point, stopping at a gas station to buy drinks and fill up his car with gas, where he was caught on CCTV cameras. When he arrived at Snapper Point, he got rid of Michelle's body and took some pictures around 9 a.m. Afterwards, he visited his parents, who didn't notice anything unusual about his behavior, and then returned home, waiting for his wife to return. Derek reported that he hadn't seen Michelle and that she hadn't come home, even accompanying his wife to the police station to file a missing persons report. On June 29, 2016, the first court hearing was held, and Derek's lawyer, Bill Whitby, told the court that Derek was pleading not guilty and was as shocked and upset by Michelle's death as the rest of the family. However, it was revealed that Derek had taken illegal drugs the day before killing Michelle, and he claimed to have only vague memories of the 2-hour trip to Snapper Point, where he threw Michelle's body off the cliff. Forensic psychologist Dr. Richard first disputed Derek's claims of memory loss, testifying that Derek was mentally fit to be punished to the full extent of his sentence. Dr. first testified that the drugs Derek was taking did not cause memory loss, and that all of his actions, from the murder to the disposal of the body, were clear and purposeful. The doctor also stated that Derek's IQ, concentration, and memory were within normal limits, and that the number of stab wounds indicated sadistic tendencies rather than memory lapses. The psychologist rejected Derek's claim that he did not feel sexually attracted to the victim and believed that Derek faked amnesia to avoid taking responsibility for the crime. A doctor, Richard, disputed Derek Barrett's claim, stating it was self-defeating because it was clear that the suspect had gained weight during the time period in question. Judge Wilson, a seasoned criminal defense attorney with 30 years of experience, expressed her skepticism about Derek Barrett's behavior in the courtroom, describing it as insincere and akin to that of a psychopath. She believed that Barrett's crime was not the result of a drunken night or poor life choices, but rather a deliberate act. During the retrial hearing, Barrett pleaded guilty to murdering and kidnapping Michelle Lang, as well as sneaking into her room while she slept and making videos. He also admitted taking 19 explicit photos of her shortly before her death. Barrett claimed he couldn't remember the 48-hour period during which he committed the crime because he was under the influence of illegal substances. Judge Wilson, however, did not believe Barrett's claim of memory loss, nor did she believe he was genuinely sorry for his actions. The Lang family consoled each other, while Barrett wiped away tears and said that he deserved to live and that this should never have happened. Judge Wilson sentenced Barrett to 34 years and 6 months in prison with a maximum term of 46 years. He will be eligible for parole in 2050. Barrett showed no emotion when sentenced. Michelle's mother, Mrs. Jiang, thanked the Australian and Chinese communities for their support during her time of grief. She also thanked the NSW police, including Detective Inspector Gary Jubelin, for investigating her daughter's death. A fund was set up to pay for Miss Lang's funeral and to support her mother when she returns to China. Tragically, Michelle Lang's story did not end there. 4 years after the crime, inexplicable events occurred in one family where a woman often visited her elderly mother. In a surprising discovery, a woman found an unknown USB device in her elderly mother's hands during a visit. When the daughter plugged the USB drive into her computer, she was shocked to find graphic videos and photos of obscene content. The police were contacted, and an investigation revealed that the USB drive contained 9 video files lasting over an hour and 13 files with photos of Michelle Lang being abused shortly before her murder on April 23, 2016. The woman who found the USB drive lived about 4 miles from Derek Barrett's former home and had no discernible connection to him. It remains a mystery where the USB drive came from and how it ended up in the woman's family home. Police were able to match the photos on the USB drive to those that Derek Barrett had deleted from his phone before his arrest in an attempt to hide his crimes. In 2020, Barrett was charged with multiple sex offenses after the disturbing content was found on the USB drive in November 2019. Prosecutors admitted they were stumped by the discovery of the device, which led to new charges. The elderly woman with dementia was confined to her home, and it is unclear how the USB drive ended up in her possession. Thanks to the new evidence, Derek Barrett's sentence was extended without parole. The horrific discovery of the USB drive in the hands of an elderly woman in a leafy Sydney suburb resulted in the convicted criminal receiving additional years of punishment. The story of Michelle Lang stands as a heartbreaking reminder to appreciate the preciousness of life, since the future is uncertain and can change in an instant. After her passing, tributes poured in from friends and acquaintances on Chinese and Australian social media, emphasizing the devastating and lasting effects of bullying, fear, and criminal behavior.